Good morning, guys. Welcome. I would just like to say, Xolilie, a very, very big welcome to you. You know, I'm very grateful that we are all grateful, the NSBC and our members, our delegates, our attendees from all over South Africa, from Africa, are very grateful for your attendance this morning. You are a business icon, a respected business leader, and I was asking you earlier, but I do know you lead over 23,000 people in your organization. So I'm sure that you've got some pretty good insights, and I'm going to have to ask you at the end and for that golden touch of what we can do. But Xolilie Sizani, I just want to say again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity of meeting you for the first time today. I know your organization, and Servest is a big partner of the NSBC. You're passionate about small business. We share that. So, and just a big welcome to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for inviting me. To the extent that the invitation is about sharing my experience, I'm also learning, and I think it's an important part of any leader during these times to be open to new ideas and to be open to new learnings. We talk in the context of the fourth industrial revolution around machine learning. I always argue that equally leaders must be comfortable with learning. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you. And yes, just to our attendees out there, we all know that we're working from home. Technology is unpredictable. We may lose each other, but we're certainly not going to stop talking. So guys, if you have poor connectivity, there will be replays after this. Bear with us, but we're certainly not going to go anywhere. You might lose us, you might not, but so far it's looking good. And just on the chat line, I'm going to refer to the chat line. If I take my eyes off you guys out there, I apologize. I'm just referring to some questions coming through, which I'm going to ask Xolilie. So, Xolilie, it's tough to lead in any time. And, with your experience of leading so many people, and for business owners out there now, they've got a lot to contend with. They've got their own selves to contend with. Many are under huge financial constraints. They've got to remain positive. They've got to remain calm, and they've got to get their business through this. And then very importantly, they've got to get their team through this. And if I could just ask you a question coming through, Xolilie, what do you expect to see in leaders during difficult times? And what should they be doing in a time like this?
Yeah, Mike, I think for me as a leader, and I think for many leaders as well, we must appreciate that in our development, in our training, in our education, our experiences, there has to be a belief that all of that has brought us to this point. In other words, the information and the experience and the knowledge and the education that we have had, for it to have been successful, it should allow us to navigate this, to navigate through this period. So the first thing that I must tell myself, or I tell myself, is I have been prepared for this, right? So what does that mean? It means that my decision-making process has to be informed by the very same principles, the same frameworks, leadership frameworks that I have learned over the years, because those can't be wrong. They might need to be tweaked because the environment that we are in is a different environment. So let me just give you a sense of what the leadership theory says and how we should be leading as leaders, irrespective of whether there was a COVID or not. What leadership and my own leadership style has been characterized by two elements. One is about being high when it comes to the elements of tasks, planning, coordinating, and really making that all the things that need to be done, the execution thereof, the strategic thinking, and all of those things are in place. So as a leader, you need to have a very high level of ability around tasks. But what also has been very important in any leader is the characteristics around relationships. The extent to which the leader makes sure that you don't just drive the development and the execution and the results, but you also appreciate the characters of individuals and your teams, and making sure that you work with your teams, you engender trust in your teams, you engender empathy with your teams, you are a part of a team of people. So if leaders have been doing that over their leadership careers, During this period of COVID, that is even more important. I give a typical example. In my space, I have been very comfortable and wanting to be surrounded and see the colleagues that work with me close to me. I need to see them in their offices and what have you. Not for any other thing other than the fact that that's how the environment that I have been in has been characterized. We worked in an office environment. I can walk to you to ask you questions and whatever. But this type of environment we are in, because I have engendered trust within my colleagues, I now have to rely purely on the results that they produce, how they produce those results, the amount of time they spend on delivering the results shouldn't be because I can't talk to them if I can't see them. So it's important during this time that the relationships are nurtured, the networks that you have had with colleagues, the network that you have had with clients. These types of webinars are platforms where we are getting new information and we're testing new ideas about how we should lead. So I think at the end of it all, that will be the core characteristic of what a leader should be doing in this time, focusing on tasks, focusing on results, but also making sure that you engender the relationships. You develop strong relationship with your colleagues, and you work very hard to make sure that you empathize with them, you trust them, you encourage them, and really to make sure that we are there for them. Mike?
Yeah, I would imagine it's more about now, as you said, Xolilie, it's more about outcomes management, as opposed to watching what they do. And it's a very different dynamic to the traditional way of management and leadership. So I think that a lot of positivity is going to come out of this, a lot of discipline, a lot of new ways of doing business. But I think that it's something positive that will come out for all business owners out there, that we have to learn to, like you said, we have to learn to trust and manage by outcomes as opposed to watching. But yeah, thank you for that, Xolilie. And I think that difficult times force change. How can leaders improve the transition of their businesses from this current state?
So I always believe that in any journey to grow any business, there are probably 3 steps that one needs to go through. The first step is really about the building. And in the building phase, you would characterize that phase by making sure that as a leader, you're surrounding yourself with the best people. These would be people that have the characteristics of being team players, of having abilities to think strategically, to have experience around operations, individuals that have tolerance for change, individuals that have a high level of business acumen. It's important that it's like when you build your house, you try and find the best builders. You don't just take an average builder out there. So in this period of time, the leaders should have, as part of the process, have surrounded themselves with the right people. The second phase, which is about creating a high performance culture, would to use the skills and competencies of these individuals that you have surrounded yourself with to focus on predominantly 5 elements. The first one is about your processes. How efficient are your processes? The second one is about your customer centricity. This time, there's a lot of demand from customers under the same level of constraint that we're experiencing in this lockdown. Customers are demanding even more from us as service providers. So you need to have a concerted focus around your customer relationships. Your people are core in any business. You may have machines, you may have all of these other infrastructure and resources, but people are very important. So to the extent that you take care of your colleagues during this time would have been an important part of that growth. But because we have started a conversation predominantly last year around the digital transformation, around the 4th industrial revolution, part of what organizations and small business should be looking at very hard is how do they embrace digital transformation. There are certain sectors that are going to find it very difficult to survive during this time. But if, for example, you are in the space where you normally host and you talk and you encourage motivational speakers and the types, the webinars are actually a digital platform where you can actually continue the message across the your clientele. So organizations need to be embracing the digital transformation and looking at ways in which you can be more efficient through using digital platforms. But lastly, it's going to be about execution. I think what is characterized by this environment, because of uncertainty, is the speed of decision making. If you procrastinate and you delay making decisions, you're going to be left out. Now, unfortunately, it's difficult to make decisions in this period because of the level of uncertainty. However, if you begin to plan, in other words, you use scenario planning, you should be able to have a view of what could the best be and what could the worst be, and also integrating that with an integrated risk framework. You should be able to say, in the event of this worst case, how can I mitigate the risks? That way, it will allow you to make quicker decisions because you have a view in terms of your scenarios of what could go wrong and what could be right, and therefore how you would mitigate the risk associated with it. So in this journey, organizations, as they transition out of this lockdown period, they have to make sure that they take care of their colleagues, they take care of the people, make sure that their processes are efficient and streamlined, make sure that your customer approach is elevated to the next level, where you really are seen by customers to be doing anything and everything to meet their needs. But you must embrace digital transformation. This is going to be critical for any organization that needs to transition out of this environment that we find ourselves. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Xolilie. And I think, coming back from the marketplace, from my SME base and many other SMEs around the country, and because of these unpredictable times and extremely unusual times, is that there's a lot of anger coming through, there's a lot of uncertainty coming through, and the problem here is that although that business owner in an SME environment needs to lead, first of all, they've got to, as I said before, they've got to be able to remain calm, they've got to be able to have purpose, they've got to remain positive. But the big challenges coming through, one of the big challenges is that, right, we don't know when. Look, we know that through our research that more than 75% of small businesses can only get to some form of normality at level 2 and level 1, in the most level 1. Now, my goodness, we don't know how long that's going to be. And we do know also that only 6% of small businesses have been able to access relief funding who've applied for it because of various circumstances, because of poor turnaround, because of unfair criteria. So these issues, coupled with that, and not knowing when we're going to get back to that normality, and as a leader, slowly getting back to normal, how can leaders optimize their business approaches with those constraints, with those difficulties, all in a basket? What is your take on that, Xolilie?
And again, it's not just a question, it's a reality. This is exactly what we're experiencing. However, I believe that there has to be a concerted approach in looking at the current businesses and how those businesses could be re-engineered in order to maximize opportunities that are presented by COVID. I always make a comment that you should never let a good crisis go to waste, right? In this environment, part of this process of re-engineering our businesses to be able to maximize opportunity, at the core is going to be an objective analysis, not just of our resources that we have, but the capabilities that we as organization have in utilizing those resources in order for us to re-engineer our businesses. One of our divisions in our organization, because of the lockdown, we've got a fleet of vehicles, but those fleet of vehicles is unable to move, right? Because the clients that we are servicing are on lockdown. So I asked the question to the team, why can't, because we know that in the logistics space, there's a lot of need to deliver products and services to clients using vehicles, motorbikes, and what have you. So I'm asking our team, we've got capable drivers, we've got vehicles on site. We know that many of the retailers out there are actually forced to deliver to clients. So why can't we begin to have a conversation with some of our retail clients to see how we can actually support them by taking the capabilities that we have, the resources that we have, and deliver some of the products they need to be delivered to clients, to their clients. So that's the mindset that is required, especially this time, is to relook at how your resources and capabilities can be re-engineered in order for the business to continue to survive. And that's going to require really an objective analysis. But we must also not be changed from what our core reason for existence is. You know, we are a facilities management company. You might be a retail organization. You might be a consulting firm. Those resources, those capabilities that you have must remain at the core. But you must also use opportunities that are presented by the COVID in order for you to maximize the new opportunities that are coming through in the market. But the re-engineering of our business is going to be key in us being able to navigate through this time, Mike.
Thank you for that, Xolilie. You know, I was talking to a few global experts over the last few weeks, and what's interesting coming out is that, and the tendency and the discussions are that the future biggest companies and the most successful companies of the future will be born during the pandemic. I mean, how do you look into that? And if you can give a positive insight into that, what are those companies that will be born, that will become the most successful in time? What are these business owners or these SME decision makers doing differently than others, would you say, Xolilie?
Yeah, I think this is why we should not be blinded in terms of not seeing the opportunities that the COVID environment is going to bring. The logistic sector is one of those sectors where in the past, many of online purchases, you know, the digital platforms for online retail is one of the areas in which there's going to be huge growth opportunities. But there has to be an appreciation and understanding of what the customers are looking for out there. We're looking for agile businesses. We're looking for organizations that are going to make the speed of delivery of services in the market much more higher than we have experienced pre-COVID. In the healthcare space, there's quite a lot of digital platforms and solutions that are coming up. We're talking to one client where they are developing scanners that will scan not just your temperature, as we're currently doing, but also the ability to scan almost an X-ray type scan, because once you are infected with the COVID, we can actually see the profile of your lungs, and based on that profile, you can determine whether there's an infection or not. So it means that you know, that digital platform will have a huge opportunity to be sold out there in the market. I've seen some footage of where the clients or small enterprises are developing almost a screening process where, as you walk through it, you know, you get showered with chemicals that allow at least to destroy some of the COVID. So what I'm saying is that there is quite a lot of those new opportunities and new ideas that are coming up within the healthcare sector, within the hygiene sector. The delivery of product and services to clients is becoming something that people will be needing, because they're doing a lot of online purchases that will require, you know, goods and services to be delivered. But at the core of it is really to look at what does the market need, and start putting together solutions that are going to help those markets. Recently, for example, we used to go, when you visit a client, you go through the security clearance and you sign you know, a register of some sort. There's been recently developments where you actually put all that information onto a tablet. What has happened now is that organization and some of the small enterprises have developed, you know, a screening platform on that very same tablet that you use to register, where you can actually assess or screen in terms of the COVID. But others are using technologies where they read your temperature and using all of that information to help clients to create an environment that is more safer. So there's quite a number of things that opportunities that this COVID environment is presenting. We have to open our eyes to these opportunities. We have to really assess our own capabilities and resources and make sure that we do not miss these opportunities. Mike?
Xolilie, 100% right. And, you know, I think it's, you know, this is easier said than done, but one would need to do whatever we can to remain calm and remain positive. Because, yes, I certainly believe, like many, this is probably the most innovative and adaptation time in our history. And if we can remain calm and we can remain positive, so we can seize these opportunities. Because if we're negative in that box, it's really tough to seize opportunities. But we do know out there, you know, I've got a question coming through. If I can read it to you, if you don't mind me, clearly. The economy will contract. Small businesses will contribute the most to employment. How can business owners contribute towards reducing the economic crunch? And what are some of the strategies that can be implemented? Great question.
Yeah, I think government has done, I think, somewhat made a somewhat a good contribution in trying to mitigate the pandemic. The funding opportunities that have been presented, and I know many of the organizations and small SMMEs are complaining because they are not getting the support, and I understand all of those. But I think to a large extent, we must, as small enterprises, pursue those opportunities that have been presented by government. There are some banks that have also made a provision for some of this. And again, there's always a talk in terms of what banks require and what, even outside the COVID environment, how stringent the requirements for funding for SMMEs has been. So it's very important that we exhaust that channel. I think that's one. The second thing that I think small enterprises need to embrace is the idea of co-petition, right? Now, what co-petition is essentially two words joined together, which is collaboration and competing. You might find that there are manufacturers that, because of the lower demand, will have additional capacity in their factories, right? And you may have been competing with those companies because you produce the same product and services. One of the strategies that small enterprises need to embrace is the idea that I could now go to the company that I've been competing with. We've seen this with the banks. The government has just allowed banks to have, you know, collaborative engagements where they look for solutions to some of the problems that are facing the market. So also SMMEs need to approach the same, where they sit together without falling foul of the competition commission issues, but really to look at contract manufacturing. What does that mean? So I might be a manufacturer of PPEs, right? But because many of my clients have reduced their capacity, I no longer have the ability to use my factory fully. So I could go to another company that I've been competing in the market with, where I contractually agree with them that they will manufacture on my behalf. That will essentially mean that, at least from a survival point of view, I'm able to somewhat reduce my cost, and I'm able to at least be still active in the market. So collaboration amongst SMMEs, to the extent that it doesn't fall foul of the competition issues, is something that we need to exploit very, very hard, because I think there are opportunities there where we can reduce the impact of this COVID environment. Mike?
Thank you, Xolilie. Yeah, 100%. And I've got one or two questions coming through, and I think you can guide us here, Xolilie, is that two different ones from two different industry sectors. I've got a small restaurant in a built-up area. I cannot deliver. I've got to get through this myself. How do I do that, and how do I lead? I've got 4 people in my team. How do I lead them and myself through this trying time?
It's a difficult one, eh?
That's a tough one. I'm glad you're answering it, Xolilie, not me.
No, it's a difficult one because, you know, that entire team is looking at you for leadership. You know, the difference between myself, for example, and that individual is that I'm surrounded by many other colleagues that I do not necessarily have to have all the answers myself. I tap on other colleagues around me to find answers to the solution. In a small entity such as that, you might not necessarily have that ability. So it's a very tough one. But as I said, you know, all of us have got some ideas about how we can navigate around this. So even though it might be a small team of 4, they've been expecting you to lead, perhaps sitting down with them and brainstorming around what are the new ways in which you can provide services. You might be amazed by the level of knowledge that many of our colleagues that we work with that report to us have. So I would, you know, as I said, it's a difficult one, but definitely sitting down with these colleagues, the 4 colleagues that report to you, the 4 colleagues that are part of a restaurant, and having a brainstorming session to say, guys, how do we survive? You know, and as I said, there might be actually brilliant ideas that you as a manager have not actually thought of, they've not crossed your mind, but just allowing colleagues around you to share ideas with you, you might find they might not give you the specific, but they might just, you know, drop an idea that you can refine even further in order for you to grow. But I think there is an opportunity during this time to make sure that you involve everyone around what solutions we can produce to survive during this time.
Clearly, 100%. And, you know, it's about that transparency. It's about, like you said, it's about working together. It's about authenticity. You know, as Winston Churchill said, as off air I spoke earlier, you know, if you're going through hell, keep going. And it is a little bit about that. But, you know, we've got I said to you earlier, I live out at Harties in the Northwest, and, you know, we've got a restaurant out here having the same pain. And what they've done is that they got their whole team together, and they've turned their restaurant into a food kitchen for the poor and for the elderly. And the entire community out here is donating food to the restaurant to cook for these people. So, and why I brought this up is because what you said is exactly what happened. They got together as a team. They in the boat together. There's not much they can do, but they're gaining so much credibility that they will get through this, and they'll become stronger as a result of this. And I think that these trying times can, and I think if you're the kind of person that can get your team together to talk with transparency, to get everyone involved, and to try and take out that negativity, I think that we can get through that. But another question coming through, Xolilie, sometimes we might repeat ourselves a bit, but, you know, it's not important. The important thing is that we can pass some great messages on here. You know, what other measures, can leaders can look for during these difficult times? So what other measures can leaders look into during these trying times? That's the question coming through.
Yeah, and again, I maybe touched a little bit on it, but I think it's important because of the level of uncertainty. It's important that we do scenario planning. You know, we look at what could the worst case look like, what could the best case look like. Because it is when we have those serious, you know, realistic discussions about the business that the solutions can start coming up. So scenario planning is very important. Sit down with your team, ask yourselves, I mean, what's the worst that could happen, colleagues? You know, because in those conversations of what the worst is called an anti-solution, in that conversation around what the worst could happen, your mind is beginning to also think, what can I do to make sure that the impact of what could happen is not as severe as it is, right? So I think that's important. Colleagues must spend a lot of time just painting the scenarios. You know, you are better, your being is better prepared when you have an idea of what things could. They might not necessarily happen the way that you have anticipated they would, but at least you've given the time and effort to think about those things. So scenario planning is very important. Also, with the outcome of that scenario planning, an integrated risk approach. So if the event does happen, you are unable to completely provide, you know, because there's no top line that's coming through, and you have to look at restructuring your organization. So how can you restructure your organization such that the service levels that you are contracted to supply to customers are not compromised? The safety of your colleagues is not compromised. You do not put yourself in a situation where you have a reduced staff complement, but you can't even provide the service to clients. The safety of your colleagues is compromised. So you need to be beginning to start talking about what are the potential risks and what is the impact of those risks on your business, and how you can then start mitigation. This is about planning, colleagues. In the dire of situations, if we do not have plans, we will fail. I think right now is a time where we need to sit down and start saying what could go wrong, and what are the risks that are associated with that event, and how do we mitigate those risks in our business. So those are the two important aspects of your business. But also, let's not shy away from what this environment is also giving us an opportunity to look at. You might have heard before this COVID lockdown started, views around how you want to restructure your organization, how you want to look at new products, how you want to look at new services as part of your growth strategy. Perhaps this is a time to relook at your growth strategy and ask yourself certain activities and plans and products and services that you had planned to actually do in 2021, 2022. Is it possible to bring those forward? Because there's an opportunity now to actually make those or to implement those. So you need to be also relooking at your strategy, your growth strategy in particular, and asking yourself, what are the chances that you can bring some of those activities that you had planned for later years, bring them forth to maximize the opportunities that we're experiencing now. Mike?
Xolilie, I've got another question coming through. If I can just read it to you. I have a small business with a small team. Xolilie, have you got some tips that can help me support and strengthen my people during this difficult time?
As I said, at this time, relationships are going to be important. And unfortunately, if those relationships have not been built before this time, you're going to have a very, very huge challenge in building them during this time, because it might be that some of these colleagues are not even able to come to work. They are working remotely. So it's going to be difficult. But let's assume in a case where you have already strengthened these relationships, and that your colleagues, they understand who you are. You've been a transparent individual. You have been empathetic in terms of your engagement with the colleagues. They understand your personality. They understand, your leadership style, your value of teams, right? So in that case, I think the idea is to make sure that you communicate with these colleagues every day to the extent that is possible. I think the one thing that anyone would be doing that will not really help us through this transition period is the inability to communicate. Communication is going to be very key. Pick up the phone, call the colleagues, check on how they are doing. I think that's going to be important. But also try and get to some, team collaboration where, for example, you're looking for new ideas. Have seminars or sessions like this where you're actually asking colleagues, to brainstorm and come up with ideas of how they can improve the business. How can we work together to make sure that we improve the way we do things? I think those are some of the things that I would suggest. And again, I move from a premise that you have had these relationships, you had this team collaboration, you have been working together with your colleagues during this time. Transparency is going to be critical. I think what I've realized is naturally we are optimistic by nature. We always look on the positive side. And the extent to which we bring the reality of this situation, your business, for example, has lost a big contract, or your client has decided that they're not going to be requiring your services during this time. And that means that your top line is going to be impacted significantly. If you are a leader and you're already thinking about restructuring, you are thinking about, because I don't have a top line, I might have to lay off people. I think those decisions must not be delayed. It's important at this time that you give some form of certainty on people. If as a manager you have been thinking about certain things and you have made a decision, but it's about executing that decision, let your teams know now. As people, we are resilient. We will take the pain, but we will move on. But to procrastinate on decision, and people know that we've lost a big contract, so they are wondering, it's been 2 days, it's been 3 days, it's been a month, it's been weeks, it's been a month. You have not told them what is going to happen with their jobs. Those type of things are creating uncertainty. People are not stupid. People can see. They might not necessarily be managers of business, but they see. They have ideas. They have a view on things. So communication, making decisions speedily, and making sure that your team is kept well informed about issues is going to be very important. Lastly, it's about managing cash. Cash is king during this time. So many businesses will have to begin conversation with even some of their suppliers about adjusting for payment terms. so that they can mitigate the risk. I mean, one of the examples that have been made is if you're renting premises, have a conversation with the landlord about reducing, for example. It might not necessarily mean that you don't pay the rent completely, because he also has other commitment, but he might be in a better financial position than yourself. So engaging with landlords around some of your fixed costs might be one way in which you are able to reduce the impact of cash in your business. I think those are some of the ideas that I would put on the table for consideration by some of the colleagues in the webinar. Mike?
Thank you, Xolilie. My apologies there. I just missed you for a short while. I have another question for another business owner. Xolilie, what is your take on the importance of demonstrating optimism, hope, care, and compassion with your team during this time?
Those things are a non-starter for me. Those things are very, very important. You cannot. You see, as leaders, we are also expected. So maybe let me just start with the answer. So I fully agree. There's no other way. You have to do those things. But as leaders, we are also people. And I think the notion of leadership across many areas where we lead is a notion that we are Superman. I think by now all of us are aware that we are not. And one of the things that is important as leaders is to also show our weaknesses. There is strength. There is strength in showing your vulnerability. There is strength, in fact, in saying to your colleagues, you don't know. Guys, I don't know. I'm also trying to find out, how do we go through this? How do we navigate through this, right? That in itself shows your humility. You know, I'm reading a book now, Good to Great, by Jim Collins, and he talks about 5-level leadership, right? And one of the things he talks about there is a professional will, which is really about the task orientation, but he talks about personal humility. And one of the things that he says is important as leaders is being able to recognize and look at ourselves through a mirror and take full responsibility for things that have not gone right, but take also full accountability or share that accountability for all the successes that we have made to our colleagues. You know, in other words, recognize that I didn't succeed as an organization on my own strength, but it's because I'm surrounded by colleagues like yourself. Those comments that you would have made previously before the lockdown are going to be the pillar upon which, you know, your own teams are going to support you. They will not be expecting all the time that you lead, but they will also be leading because of the knowledge and the experience that they also have. So in this time, being vulnerable and being able to make your team know that you don't have all the answers is going to show the humility. It's going to show how human we are as leaders, but it's also going to allow others to rise. You know, I used to play soccer when I was a youngster, and I knew where my strengths are and I knew where my weaknesses are. And I always made sure that I pair myself with people that had strengths in areas where I have weaknesses. And you'll find the same with your team. Surround yourself with a very strong team. Make sure that colleagues that have strengths in areas where you have weaknesses, those colleagues are actually part of your team. And make sure that they also are able to be given a platform to challenge you, so that ultimately the solution that comes out of those meetings, those conversations, are the best solutions for the entire organization. Mike?
Thank you, Xolilie. Xolilie, we know that there's no playbook for the pandemic. There are valuable lessons to learn that should not go to waste, but maybe that's for tomorrow. Today is for leading with purpose. Maybe if you can allude a bit to that.
Mike, in my organization, I've done a lot of recruitment in the last 18 months than I've done, in fact, in my entire career. And I've said to all of the colleagues that have joined me that the one reason why I appointed them was partly because I see that they understand the purpose of their being in relation to what we are seeking to achieve as an organization. Because without purpose, you will give up easily. You know, you come into an environment where, for example, there are certain systems and processes that are not in place. The level of competence is not the level at which you are expecting certain processes to be performed. It's easy for you coming from an organization where those things are not there, or running businesses where those things are not there, for you to throw your toys essentially out of the court. However, if you believe that your entire being has actually brought you to this point, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, I believe the experience, education, the things that I've done up until today has been somewhat preparing me for this day. So it's important that organizations understand that we all in business are here to make money, but that's not our purpose. We have to come to existence because there's a certain need in the market that you want to service. Now, it's important that that becomes core, and therefore whatever we do around our businesses to remain purposeful. As to, let's not forget why we started this business. Let's not forget what was the need. If it has been about making money, of course, with this environment that we find ourselves where it's very hard to make money, you're going to panic. However, if you had a purpose, I experienced this with our own organization where our people are at the core. And so when we had many of our clients telling us that they will not be paying us, and therefore it means that many of our colleagues are going to not earn a living in that month, we went all out. I mean, my HR colleagues didn't sleep, literally didn't sleep, working on making sure that we know who these colleagues are. We apply to the TRS fund, talking to lawyers on this side, doing anything and everything, because our purpose is to make sure that we take care of our colleagues. So the purpose is very, very important. And I think this time around, we're going to see really which organization have been established for a purpose, and those that have been established purely to make money. Mike?
Thank you, Xolilie. Now, I've just got a request from Sarah to repeat Winston Churchill's quote. And of course, if you are going through hell, keep going. And I know many of us are going through hell right now, and it's a great quote. And I know that, Xolilie, you also enjoy his quotes, and he's got many more than that. But we're coming towards the final question before the ultimate question, Xolilie, and it's an important one here. For many business owners and the staff within, COVID-19 will cause major financial struggles for the household. Emotional exhaustion is debilitating and affects performance too. How does the business owner, as the leader, approach this?
Mike, I think, and again, I've said this to my own team, that we mustn't think that COVID is going away. In fact, anything that we must begin to do going forward has to factor in COVID. In other words, if we had strategies that we had developed in terms of how we service and provide solutions to our client, we must now refine those strategies in the context of COVID, not COVID as a short term. Because I think what has COVID allowed us to do is to push certain things that we had planned for. In my organization, we had planned to use an online platform a lot as part of our communication. So we started already making sure that we upgrade our Microsoft licenses. But with COVID, it has forced us to do that now. So it is important that during this time, we make sure that we think of COVID as an event that is going to be with us for the next 2, 3, 4 years. It might not necessarily be at the same levels. They might have found as well vaccines by that time, but essentially the way in which we run our business, because what COVID is going to do is going to also force us to think about, why do I need an office? Many of our small, medium enterprises have offices that they rent, right? And it's amazing when you talk to some of the business owners, the reason why they rent offices, right? Especially in most expensive locations, right? But what COVID has forced you to do now is you begin to realize that, in fact, you can run your business without necessarily being at a certain office park. You can run your business effectively working from home. So do you need, for example, hot desks instead of having a fully fledged office? And what the implication of that will be in terms of your cost structure and also your ability to service the client. So the thinking has to begin to factor COVID not as a short-term solution or the short-term problem, but as a long-term problem that you need to be providing services and solutions within the context of. If we first accept that, it means that the challenges and the solutions that you're building are contextualized and are not just for the event, but are also for a long-term strategy of a long-term survival strategy of your business and growth of your business. So those things are only important. Communication, I hear the colleague is talking about, how do you, with all the challenges that how do we stay motivated? How do we stay encouraged? It's difficult, colleagues. It's difficult. It's not easy, but the things that have worked for you in the past, do not drop them. Do not think that none of what you have used to succeed up until this time is no longer relevant. Reflect on the stories, reflect on your own successes, reflect on how you have overcome. As I said, as a people, we are quite resilient. This too shall pass. I think there's one thing for sure, that this too shall pass. If you look at what the Spanish flu and the number of people that it killed, unfortunately, it passed. Over time, we moved over that. Right? So this too shall pass. So please reflect on the successes of what you have been able to achieve before COVID. Draw from those lessons and make sure that those are also implemented during this time. And I think that's how we will try and remain focused and remain motivated and remain courageous. We have succeeded before, and we will be able to overcome this as well. Hope is the only thing that we must have. During this COVID time, we must, at the core of it, is hope that we're going to overcome this. If we lose that hope, we will not be able to overcome this COVID. It will overcome us. So Mike, that belief that as a people we have the ability to overcome is very, very important. The success stories, the things that you have been able as small enterprises to achieve before COVID, please learn from those and bring those with during this time. Look into the future in terms of your strategic growth plans and make sure that you factor COVID in those plans. Bring some of the plans that you had for 2021, 2022, bring them forward so that at least you can see if they would be helpful for you to grow your business. Make sure that you engage with government. Do not give up. Engage with government. See how you can access some of the opportunities that relief funds that they have made available, and use those opportunities. Mike?
Xolilie Sizani, you're an absolute legend. You're a business icon. You're a highly respected business leader. You're the Group Chief Executive of the Servest Group, a respected large organization in facilities management. I'm certainly grateful. I know that our attendees are totally grateful for your contribution this morning. We needed this. It's not easy out there. And a person like you, your caliber has certainly been able to help many people this morning. And I can assure you that your message will go far beyond the people who attended this morning. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the NSBC, from our attendees out there, for your incredible contribution. And for our attendees out there, go to the Servest website, you see what they do. It's an incredible organization. And we wish you well, Xolilie, and I hope that we can do this again someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Come on.